What began as a peaceful Sunday outing quickly spiraled into a real-life mystery that could rival the plot of any detective thriller. Two young girls disappeared from a neighborhood park in Zion, Illinois, an event that would unravel a sequence of developments as perplexing as they were heartbreaking. From the very first moment, the case defied belief, growing ever more tangled until all its secrets finally converged into a single, astonishing conclusion. Laura Hobbs was born on September 25, 1996, in Texas. She was the eldest of 4 children. After her parents separated, her mother moved the family to the quiet town of Zion, nestled along the shores of Lake Michigan. There, Laura found happiness. Her maternal grandparents lived nearby, and she quickly bonded with the neighborhood children. Zion felt like home. In the spring of 2005, when Laura was 8 years old, her father made an effort to reunite with the family. He left Texas and moved in with Laura, her mother, and her younger brothers, hoping to mend old wounds. On Sunday, May 8th, Mother's Day, the family went to the lake to celebrate. They flew kites and enjoyed the warm spring afternoon. Later that day, Laura asked to go for a bike ride with her best friend, 9-year-old Crystal. The girls had been inseparable since Laura's arrival in Zion. They lived close by, attended the same school, and spent countless hours together. Whether playing at home, riding bikes, or whispering through open windows when they couldn't come outside. That afternoon, around 3 p.m., Laura and Crystal set off for the park, just a few hundred yards from their homes. It was a familiar spot with a long bike trail where they often played. Zion was considered safe, and their parents had no reason to worry. But when dinner time came and the girls had not returned, concern began to set in. By 7 p.m., their families went to the park to look for them. They walked the bike path, calling their names, but there was no sign of the girls. As dusk fell, relatives, neighbors, and friends joined the search, combing the park and nearby streets. The hours dragged on with no trace of the 2 children. At 9 p.m., gripped by fear, the families called the police. Authorities responded swiftly. Police officers, search dogs, and dozens of volunteers mobilized through local organizations to assist. Community members rallied to support the effort, focusing attention on the park where the girls had last been seen. The search for Laura and Crystal had begun, and with it, a mystery that would haunt the town for years to come. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Your support means a lot to us and helps us grow. A huge thank you to everyone who's been watching. As the frantic search for Laura and Crystal continued, police spoke with local children living along the route between the girls' homes and the park. Several confirmed seeing Laura and Crystal pass by that afternoon. They even stopped to chat and said they were headed to the park. Simultaneously, officers canvassed the neighborhood door to door, hoping someone might have seen the girls later that day. Flyers bearing their photos and details of their disappearance were distributed throughout the community. But with each passing hour, hope began to dim. Night had fallen, and despite an all-out search across the town, there was no sign of the 2 girls. It was becoming increasingly clear that something terrible had happened. The search stretched into the early hours of the morning. Around 4:30 a.m., police decided to take a brief pause. But Laura's father, Jerry Hobbs, and her grandfather refused to stop. Determined to keep looking, they returned to the park and split up to cover more ground. Just before 6 a.m., as dawn began to break, Laura's grandfather heard a shout. He rushed toward the sound and found Jerry, visibly shaken. Jerry claimed he had found the girls. Off the main bike path, hidden in dense undergrowth, lay the bodies of Laura and Crystal. Bloodied and motionless, it was immediately clear to him that both girls were dead. He quickly called the police, who arrived at the scene within minutes. Forensic teams examined the site and confirmed the community's worst fears. Both girls had been brutally murdered. Autopsy reports later revealed they had each suffered multiple stab wounds. Laura had been stabbed 20 times, Crystal 11. Authorities believed the weapon used was a knife. The news sent shockwaves through the town of Zion, where violent crime was nearly unheard of. Now the community faced the chilling reality that 2 children had been murdered just a short distance from their homes. Investigators turned their full attention to finding the killer. Almost immediately, suspicion fell on Jerry Hobbs. Detectives were troubled by the fact that he, alone, had discovered the girls' bodies, despite hours of searching by police and volunteers in the same area. As they dug into his background, a disturbing picture emerged. Jerry had a lengthy criminal history, including drug-related offenses and assaults. One incident in 2001, while the family still lived in Texas, stood out. After a heated argument with his wife outside their home, 3 passing men intervened, fearing for her safety. Enraged, Jerry retrieved a chainsaw and began chasing them. The men eventually subdued him until police arrived. Jerry was charged and later sentenced to 10 years probation. That probation didn't last. He missed a mandatory check-in with his probation officer, leading to its revocation and an 18-month prison sentence. Jerry was released just weeks before the murders and had traveled to Zion shortly thereafter, hoping to reunite with his family. For detectives, the pieces of the puzzle were deeply unsettling. Jerry's history suggested a volatile temperament, and his recent return added another layer of complexity. Still, there was no concrete evidence linking him to the crime, nor any clear motive. Nevertheless, police asked him to come in for questioning. Jerry agreed. Over the course of a grueling 20-hour interrogation, Jerry initially denied any involvement in the deaths of his daughter and her best friend. He told investigators that after noticing Laura hadn't come home, he went out searching and eventually found the bodies in the park. But as the hours dragged on, cracks began to form in his story. Under relentless pressure from detectives, Jerry's account shifted. Eventually, he began to confess. What had started as a desperate search for 2 missing girls had now become something even more disturbing. A murder case in which the father of one victim was now at the center of the investigation. In a startling confession, Jerry Hobbs told investigators that on the evening of May 8th, he had indeed gone searching for his daughter Laura and found her in the park with Crystal. According to his statement, he scolded Laura for going out without permission and insisted she return home with him. When she refused, he grabbed her by the arm to force her to come with him. Laura resisted, and Crystal intervened, demanding that he let her go. What happened next, as described by Jerry, shocked investigators. He claimed Crystal pulled a small knife from her pocket and pointed it at him. Enraged, he said, he wrestled the knife away and in a violent fit stabbed both girls multiple times. He then left their bodies hidden in the thick brush and returned home. Later that morning, he allegedly discovered the bodies and notified the police, an attempt, he said, to deflect suspicion. Though in tears during his confession, Jerry signed a written statement and repeated the account on video, saying, "I was walking on the dirt trail, and I ran into Laura and her friend Crystal. I told Laura that she had to come home, and she argued with me, and I grabbed her by the arm. She tried pulling away and was telling me to let her go. Crystal also telling me to let Laura go. Crystal pulled out a small knife from her pocket and again told me to let Laura go. Laura was fighting me, and I punched her in the face. She dropped to the ground." The revelation devastated the families of both girls. None could fathom that Laura's own father had confessed to such a horrific act. Jerry's wife later told investigators she had long feared his violent tendencies, given his criminal past. With a signed confession and videotaped admission, Jerry Hobbs was swiftly arrested and charged with the murders. Prosecutors soon announced they would seek the death penalty. But as preparations for trial began, unexpected developments began to cast doubt on the case. Jerry was assigned a defense attorney, and almost immediately he recanted his confession. He now claimed he had nothing to do with the murders and had confessed only under extreme duress. According to him, detectives had subjected him to a marathon 20-hour interrogation. He alleged they threatened him and his family, physically mistreated him, and exploited his grief and exhaustion. At the time, he said, he hadn't slept in more than 2 days and was overwhelmed with shock and sorrow after discovering his daughter's lifeless body. Jerry claimed the officers suggested that if he confessed, they would let him go and allow him to rest. Under intense psychological pressure, he said, he repeated the version of events they fed to him. The statement was drafted for him, and he was told to read it aloud on camera. His attorney promptly requested a review of the case, arguing that the confession had been coerced. Prosecutors, however, pushed back, insisting the confession was voluntary and backed by video evidence. The request was denied, and the case moved toward trial. What followed was years of legal limbo. As Jerry waited for his day in court, his attorney began to uncover troubling details. Despite the magnitude of the crime, not a single piece of physical evidence tied Jerry to the murders. Suspicious, the attorney shifted focus to the forensic evidence collected at the crime scene. He discovered that while investigators had followed standard procedures, collecting swabs, scraping debris from beneath the girl's fingernails, and preserving samples in cold storage, none of these had ever been tested. The defense attorney successfully petitioned for the evidence to be sent to an independent lab, despite resistance from prosecutors. In 2008, forensic analysts finally completed their examination, and the results turned the case on its head. Several male DNA samples were found on Laura's body, including foreign skin cells under her fingernails and semen on her clothing and in multiple locations. None of the samples matched Jerry Hobbs. The evidence pointed to an entirely different man. After years of claiming innocence and facing the threat of execution, Jerry Hobbs was no longer just a suspect. He was now a man falsely accused. The forensic breakthrough in Jerry Hobbs's case was damning. DNA evidence conclusively revealed that Laura had been sexually assaulted. Though no foreign DNA was found on Crystal, investigators and family members alike believed the same attacker had murdered both girls. Armed with this critical evidence, Jerry's defense attorney filed a motion to have all charges dropped and his client released from prison. But what followed was a stunning and deeply troubling setback. The district attorney refused to acknowledge the significance of the DNA findings. Incredibly, he claimed the presence of semen on Laura's body was inconsequential, suggesting, without evidence, that it may have come from previous activity in the park. According to him, the park was frequented by couples, and biological traces could have made their way onto Laura via grass or nearby bushes. Even when informed that semen had been found inside the child's body, the prosecutor did not relent. Despite the absurdity of such a theory, Jerry Hobbs remained behind bars. His trial loomed, and the prosecution showed no intention of backing down. With no other recourse, the defense succeeded in submitting the unidentified DNA sample to the FBI's national database. But there was no match. All they could do was wait, hoping that someday the DNA would lead to the real killer. In the meantime, Jerry sat in prison, condemned not by evidence, but by the stubborn refusal of authorities to admit a mistake. 4 years passed. Hundreds of miles away in Arlington, Virginia, a new case emerged, one that, at first, seemed entirely unrelated. Amanda Snell, a 20-year-old military service member stationed at a base in Arlington, was living a promising and selfless life. Coming from a proud military family, she joined the service out of a sense of duty. Outside of her military obligations, Amanda volunteered at a local church, working closely with children with autism and other developmental differences. The experience lit a fire in her. She planned to pursue a career in special education once her service ended. But on July 13, 2009, Amanda failed to report for duty. Concerned, her fellow service members went to her room. The door was unlocked, and upon entering, they found everything in perfect order. Her bed made, her personal items neatly arranged, but Amanda was nowhere in sight. Then they opened the closet. Inside, Amanda's lifeless body was found crumpled in an unnatural position. A pillowcase was pulled over her head. The initial autopsy failed to determine a clear cause of death, but later results confirmed that Amanda had died of suffocation. She had likely been dead for more than a day by the time she was found. No signs of physical trauma were present, and investigators concluded she had not been sexually assaulted. However, her laptop and tablet were missing, raising suspicions of foul play. When investigators spoke with Amanda's parents, they learned something curious. Amanda suffered from severe migraines. During particularly painful episodes, she would isolate herself in a dark room and sometimes cover her head with a pillowcase. Given this detail and the absence of visible wounds, detectives considered the possibility that her death may have been a tragic accident. Still, they didn't dismiss the possibility of murder. A single men's shoe print was discovered in front of the closet where Amanda was found, but authorities were unable to determine who it belonged to. With limited evidence and no leads, the case remained open, its tragic questions unanswered. In February 2010, a 26-year-old woman was walking home from the Arlington metro station toward her boyfriend's house when she was approached by an unknown man in the middle of the street. Brandishing a gun and a knife, the man tried to force her into his vehicle. She resisted fiercely, using quick thinking to throw her purse as a distraction before fleeing toward her boyfriend's home. Her screams drew him and his friends out onto the street, and they immediately called the police. Although the suspect had already fled the scene, the victim provided officers with a detailed description of the man, and notably, she remembered the vehicle he was driving, a beige Dodge Durango. With her testimony, police created a composite sketch and launched an active manhunt. 2 weeks later, on February 27th, the violence escalated. 2 women returning home after a night out were ambushed as they stood on their doorstep. An armed man approached them from behind and demanded their wallets. When they said they had no money, he forced them into the house and tied their hands. At one point, he left the room, giving one of the women just enough time to wriggle free and dial 911. But the attacker returned swiftly, smashed the phone against the wall, and seized one of the women. He dragged her to his car and drove off. Once far enough away, he raped her, bound her head with duct tape, and strangled her with a scarf until she lost consciousness. Hours later, the woman awoke, half buried in snow by the side of the road. Passers-by called for help, and she was rushed to the hospital, where she gave police a detailed account of the assault. Once again, she described the attacker's appearance and, crucially, identified his car as a beige Dodge Durango. In a chilling twist, just 2 hours before that brutal attack, Another woman had reported a man fitting the same description, trying to lure her into his car. She fought back, using a stun gun to escape. Detectives realized they were now dealing with a serial predator, one who was escalating rapidly and posed an extreme threat to public safety. The vehicle became the critical lead. Investigators began tracing all owners of beige Dodge Durangos in the region, and soon their diligence paid off. During a routine inspection of one vehicle, officers made a stunning discovery: a student ID belonging to the woman left to die in the snow, along with one of her earrings. Inside the vehicle, they found the same type of duct tape used to bind her, and even a stun gun, confirming this was the attacker's car. The vehicle was registered to Jorge Avila Torres, a 21-year-old serviceman stationed at the very same Arlington military base, where Amanda Snell's body had been discovered months earlier. More disturbingly, Avila Torres lived in the same residential building as Amanda, just a few floors below her. A horrifying picture was beginning to emerge, one that would soon link a series of brutal attacks and a murder in Arlington to a far older tragedy in Zion, Illinois. During the search of Jorge Avila Torres's room, investigators uncovered damning evidence. A recently purchased pistol and a large cache of ammunition were found, along with a chilling discovery on his computer: a trove of explicit and violent videos, many depicting unconscious women. The content painted a disturbing portrait of a man obsessed with cruelty and domination. Police showed photographs of Torres alongside images of other men to the 3 women who had recently survived his attacks. All 3 immediately and unequivocally identified him. They remembered his face clearly. He had made no effort to disguise himself during any of the assaults. With mounting evidence against him, Torres was arrested and held without bail pending trial. Investigators had no doubt he was behind the abduction and sexual assault of one woman and the attempted attacks on 2 others. But a far more troubling question still lingered. Could he also be responsible for the mysterious death of Amanda Snell? At first, police had no direct evidence tying Torres to Amanda's murder. But determined to break the case, investigators hatched a bold plan. They placed an undercover informant in his jail cell, someone wired to record conversations. The strategy worked faster than anyone expected. Within days, Torres began to boast about his crimes. He admitted to killing Amanda, casually stating he did it simply because the opportunity presented itself. He described the thrill he felt during the murder, and in chilling detail, recounted how he left her body in the closet and cleaned her room afterward to cover his tracks. Unbeknownst to him, his own words would lead investigators to overlooked evidence. He told the informant he had sexually assaulted Amanda on her bed using a condom. After the assault, he moved her body into the closet and remade the bed, except for one oversight. While he removed the top sheet, he left the mattress pad behind. Detectives immediately recovered the mattress pad and sent it for forensic testing. Lab analysts found a trace of semen that matched Torres's DNA perfectly, and that wasn't all. Torres had also told the informant about a pair of Nike sneakers he kept in his car. Crime scene investigators seized the shoes and compared their sole pattern to the partial print found near Amanda's closet. It was an exact match. With these findings, Torres was officially charged with Amanda Snell's murder. As he remained in custody awaiting trial, authorities uploaded his DNA profile to the FBI's national database. Then came the moment that changed everything. Just weeks later, investigators in Zion, Illinois, received confirmation. The DNA found on Laura Hobbs's body, semen collected from multiple locations, was a perfect match to Jorge Avila Torres. The man now in custody for a string of violent crimes in Arlington had just been identified as the true perpetrator of one of Zion's most haunting cold cases, the 2005 murders of Laura Hobbs and Crystal Tobias. What followed the DNA match was as shocking as it was tragic. Investigators soon discovered that Jorge Avila Torres wasn't just a random predator. He was originally from Zion, Illinois. Even more disturbingly, he had once been close friends with the older brother of Crystal Tobias, one of the two murdered girls. This connection revealed that both Crystal and Laura had known Torres, a fact later confirmed by other neighborhood children. At the time of the 2005 murders, Torres was just 16 years old. Despite his proximity to the victims and his familiarity with them, police never once considered him a suspect. Their investigation had zeroed in entirely on Laura's father, Jerry Hobbs, who went on to spend 5 years in jail awaiting trial for a crime he didn't commit. Once Torres's DNA was linked to Laura's body, Jerry's defense attorney demanded his client's immediate release and the full dismissal of all charges. This time, the prosecution could offer no defense. The presence of Torres's semen on the young girl's body made Jerry's alleged involvement impossible. Shortly after his release, Jerry announced plans to sue the police department and local authorities for coercing a false confession and for the half-decade he had spent in wrongful imprisonment, faced with a case they were certain to lose, and one that would shine a glaring spotlight on their misconduct. Officials quickly offered a settlement. Jerry accepted, receiving nearly $8 million in compensation. Meanwhile, Torres's legal reckoning began to unfold. 4 years after his arrest in Virginia, the trial for Amanda Snell's murder came to a close. Despite maintaining his innocence, the jury unanimously convicted him. Torres was sentenced to death for Amanda's killing, and for the attempted abduction of 2 women and the kidnapping and rape of a third. He received 5 life sentences, plus an additional 168 years in prison. Following the Virginia verdict, Torres was extradited to Illinois to stand trial for the murders of Laura Hobbs and Crystal Tobias. At first, he denied any involvement. His attorney argued that the DNA evidence alone was not enough to prove guilt. But with the death penalty hanging over him and no real path to freedom, Torres ultimately accepted a plea deal. In exchange for confessing to the double homicide, Torres was spared a second death sentence. Instead, he received an additional 100 years in prison and a transfer to another facility, a move he requested, claiming his life was in danger at his current prison. Under the terms of the agreement, Torres was not required to disclose the full details of the crime. A formal admission of guilt was sufficient. Today, he remains behind bars on death row, awaiting execution, a date that may never come, as is often the case with capital punishment. But while justice finally caught up with the real killer, accountability for those who failed to find him came nowhere close. The police officers who coerced Jerry Hobbs into confessing, knowing he had just discovered his own daughter's body, faced no consequences. None were charged, disciplined, or even reassigned. As for Jerry, the damage was permanent. Struggling to rebuild a life shattered by injustice, he fell into drug use and was later arrested for resisting arrest. He escaped custody briefly and was sentenced to 2 more years in prison. He was never able to reunite with his family and eventually moved back to Texas. In a rare interview, Jerry spoke candidly about the moment he signed the false confession that derailed his life. When asked why he gave in, he replied, "I found my daughter dead. They didn't even need to try to break me. I was already broken." The case drew widespread national criticism, with the Zion Police Department and the Lake County Prosecutor's Office coming under fire for their tunnel vision and investigative failures. Had they cast a wider net or followed the evidence more thoroughly, they might have identified Torres much earlier. Instead, by focusing solely on one man, they inadvertently allowed a violent predator to kill again and to assault multiple other women. And those, tragically, are only the cases we know of. All right, guys, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed my video, please share your thoughts on this story, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot to me. Thank you.